Hi, we are today at the Wicked6 Games at the HyperX Esports Arena. I'm joined today by...
Introduce myself. Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Nwatu. I've been doing security for the last 10 plus years, currently in the Bay Area.
And hello, everyone. Chris Camacho, currently CEO of NinjaJobs and Chief Strategy Officer at Flashpoint. And I've been in security about 15 years, based out of Northern Virginia.
And my name is Juliet Okafor. I am the Senior Vice President of Global Sales for Habituate and also the CEO of RevolutionCyber and a partner with Cat's-Eye. So I guess the conversation today will be about our own experiences in the cybersecurity industry. There's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion. I think the three of us are definitely representatives of that, each having significant experience in our respective areas. And so it may be good for each of us to give just a short bio summary, one minute, and then we can talk a little bit about why we got into the field.
All right, I guess I'll start. So the passion for me for cybersecurity started out when I started an undergrad at Penn State University. Was able to receive a DoD Information Assurance Scholarship, which got me working within DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. That sort of nurtured my love for the information assurance and cybersecurity best practices. And then from there, I got some, I would say, sage wisdom and advice from a fellow coworker that basically said, like, you need to go and see what exists out in Silicon Valley. You need to cast a wider net in terms of how security is done in the private industry versus what I was doing within the federal government, especially within the DoD. And so once I did that, it was like I had stops at LinkedIn, doing like incident response there. From there to Twilio, doing more incident response. And then went to Stitch Fix to sort of look at how to build out your own information security program. And now I'm at NetFlix doing some information security work there. I would say like the comfort food with security that I love is incident response with a little bit of detection, engineering, and response. So that's how I got into the world of cybersecurity, information security, moving forward. And it's just something that I'm very passionate about. It's not like a job, it's like a hobby. I really do enjoy it. And meeting wonderful people like I have to the right of me. So that's pretty much my journey so far.
So my story is a little unique. I'm an attorney, actually. Trained. I studied actually marketing, so I thought I'd be a journalist or a PR person, and grew up in New York City. But I literally got my first job due to loss, so I lost my job about a month before I found out I was pregnant with my child. I stayed home for about 10 months and loved my babies, but decided I needed to get to work. And ultimately applied for a job online with no experience. It was in sales, which I'd done already for about 10 years. And so this MSSP, tiny company, took a chance on me. And within the year, I went from being an account executive all the way to being the director of the commercial practice. And then within 2 years, I was a VP and then a senior vice president. So it's been a great rise. I think one of the things that I found to be the reason for my quick growth is my willingness to take risks in the industry, and also to be able to translate different areas of business to technical people and vice versa. And I find that over and over again, my ability to communicate has helped me to rise in the industry.
Great story.
Thanks.
So yeah, my story starts with more being a finance guy, actually, with always having a hobby in IT and computers. And then I was in the day trading world right before the internet boom happened back in the 90s.
Yes.
And then somehow or another, a job at Citibank doing security engineering found me. I did that for a year before the World Bank recruited me, and I got my hands into many different teams, building out SOCs, security engineering and such. Towards the end of my career there, I was working on a lot of collaboration with central banks, learning their security programs, really building collaboration networks. And I think that got attention of some of the Wall Street banks, which ended up recruiting me. So I ended up at Bank of America, where I continued that spirit of collaboration, information sharing, building out networks, which then got me into the NinjaJobs side, where you take that collaboration network, and then I had all these people sending me resumes and asking for help in finding their next job. So we built a whole platform and community around it, and that's actually taken off really well. So it's been great to see us trying to help like the young up and coming folks, folks that want to get into the security industry, and then also help the CISO folks that want to become CIOs or CTOs. It's all over the place.
Great.
And as we all know, this market has definitely boomed, and there's so much opportunity out there, so it's exciting to see.
What do you think, guys, is one of the biggest challenges you see in recruiting more women and minorities into the industry?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this. So I think it's a unique perspective as the ability to, as a hiring manager, like you really want to be intentional about the work you go into in terms of diversifying your pipeline. And I know there's always talks about, well, how do you go to the pipeline and get it diversified if you're not really going out there to go to different places? I think part of that is, how do you see your reflection in the community that you work in?
Yeah.
And if that's not really clear or set, there is a barrier there in terms of trying to diversify our workforce. So for me, it's being intentional and thoughtful about the process of how do I use that leverage of my network, as you were mentioning, to just say like, who's available and how do I get them on board? And I think within that, I would love to hear your thoughts about this as we go through this question is, with the different leveling that's happening in terms of entry level and this mid-level and senior, from the experiences that I've had to date, I've been having challenges. Well, how do I get entry-level people into companies to start working in the information security, cybersecurity space, more so when teams or companies are looking for potentially that mid-level or that senior, that individual can just get up and start walking and going without too much hand-holding. So I'm really interested in your thoughts, Chris, around this, because it's
interesting.
But I definitely want to make sure we have a chance to answer the rest of the question too.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. It's obviously we know cybersecurity is more of a male-dominated field, but there's definitely been an uptick in both minorities and female in cybersecurity, which is exciting to see. I myself, being a minority myself, I try to help our community as much as possible by just giving them guidance, mentoring, actually taking a person that may be up and coming in cybersecurity and then having them talk to someone that's been more experienced in that field. Really hammering in on the skills and their, where they could be successful at and helping them move up in their career. Taking folks that are kind of middle management, identifying and working with those, whether they're female, minority, or whoever, and just really helping them. Kind of back to this collaboration networking perspective, using avenues like this one here today in order to find new talent, and then having them work and work and collaborate with like the CISOs of the world, right?
Yes.
Tell these CISOs, hey, you need to get with this community here, or sponsor the events like this because you're going to find great talent here. That everyone right now is fighting for. It's quite unfortunate, but everyone says, I can't find cybersecurity talent. Although they're out there.
Oh my gosh, they're emailing me every day.
Yeah, exactly. You just got to find them, and that's, you have to come to places like these. So you have to talk to people like us, and then we can guide them to, you need to go talk to this person. Are you looking for a SOC engineer? You need to go talk to this person, and just diversify where you're looking for your candidate pool.
I agree.
I would like to add on to that.
Go ahead.
Real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think one of the unique things is also like how organic and authentic we are when we do that outreach and engagement. I think sometimes, I would say, from my experiences, it can be seen as, well, I'm just reaching out to you because that you are what you are. I am who I am. And it's not an authentic, nurtured investment in the relationship to build a strong pipeline. It's not transactional. And then I try to strive for like building those relationships and using the community and the network to be more of a long-lasting investment, so that it's always there, like whenever any of us would need it to, like we can lean on, versus a transactional like relationship with respect to the inclusion, diversity aspect, but just having a healthy pipeline of talent, really, wherever they may exist.
So
actually, let me add to that. Sorry, one more.
Wait, no. let me say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the one thing. Okay, so I'm very clear on the fact that it would be nice to have those things. It's often not the case. I think that's a long-term battle we'll continue to face, and we'll continue to make the changes and kind of get there. Today, we as minorities need to stop expecting that people want to hire us, because here's the deal. If you go into a situation and this person needs me, they need to fill their diversity quota. I'm not offended by it. I'm not offended by it because that means I'm more valuable to this person than the other person who doesn't meet the diversity quota. I think for me, it's been another area where I found going into the market, knowing I'm a Black woman makes me rare. Knowing the fact that I know my stuff, I'm in security, and a Black woman makes it so that I'm highly paid. There's nothing wrong with going into a company that doesn't love you from the start. The key is, how does that fit with what your individual goals are? Can you live with whatever the backlash is? And when you get in, how do you make the change? How do you bring more people in like you? And maybe it's your Silicon Valley, like, oh, we've got to love each other and we're gonna hug. And no, I'm from New York. I'm happy just to get a leg in the door. And I grew up, working at law firms on Wall Street. There weren't a lot of Black people there either. But there were strides made over time. And essentially, the best and brightest African Americans had to prove themselves more than others. The best and brightest women had to give up children and do all sorts of things. But when they got in, they started to build communities and programs that allowed others to come in after us. I think we just need to accept what is today, work in parallel to improve it, and then start to set measures for how we expect them to treat us tomorrow. I think that's the clearest.
No, that's great advice. And another piece of advice I would give folks, especially as they're trying to get into cybersecurity or already in cybersecurity, is don't be so introverted. You have to work on your brand. You have to work on your network, the community. If you're already happen to have a chance, or you open the door to work at an enterprise, learn what that enterprise does. Yeah. Meet with the right folks. Like back to this mentoring program. Find yourself a mentor. Because if you're just another person in the organization, you're probably never going to get noticed or move up in the world. You really have to go beyond the computer and find the people skills and the networking skills and learn other aspects of cybersecurity that aren't so traditional. And I've seen that that's worked really well across the board.
And the challenge, though, I find now is that we have, oftentimes we hear there's a problem, so we don't have enough technical people. So thousands of schools have created these cybersecurity programs that are book focused. Then the people spend thousands of dollars to finish the program and come out. They have no skills to actually do the job. They don't have the experience that they need to actually get either an internship or anything else. And then over and over again, you keep finding people, the same companies are like, there's no one to hire. But we're producing more cybersecurity professionals, but they're not suited to the roles that are available. There's a gap. You talk all the time about people skills development, branding. I think one of the things that is the biggest problem for cybersecurity is that it's an industry of introverts. It started with a lot of people who are introverted, and now we're being asked to develop these social skills on a dime. And like you said, the authenticity is from the fact that most of the people don't want to talk to anybody else, right? So what do they do?
I think part of, from my perspective and experiences would be how do you nurture your self-awareness as to where you have those deficiencies and potential gaps?
Yep.
And then taking the time and I like this, the saying I've been telling myself and my team members lately is how do we work to be in a state of being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable?
Yes.
So that identifying and being self-aware about those gaps will just make you lean in a little bit more. So when I get to this place, ask me why am I feeling this way?
Yes.
Right. What are some skills and tools I can at least attempt to use and practice so that I can at least stretch myself? I'm all about how do you stretch people in a safe way so that they understand I know my limits, but part of that is just being self-aware of where you're at. And I think that journey is different for every person, but as that perspective is gained, just being self-aware as to how you get to that point, and hopefully you have the right mentoring, coaching, training, even peer networks that you can do that exercise in, I think is just one of the first steps of getting to, like you said, moving out of the introvertness of the community. But I think there's more of that, of the extrovert, and there's different ways how that plays out in individuals that I think we're really leaning on. So I think it's there. You just have to sort of nurture and bring it out of people.
But I also think that the recruitment process actually naturally filters out people who might have the skill set to actually have the conversations. They rely so heavily on technical skills from the gate that the people who are highly technical tend not to be the ones with the best skills, right? And there aren't a lot of jobs for psychologists, right? And we need a lot of psychologists in our industry. There are not for therapists or for herbalists. And some of the areas where we're asking people to think more about their personal lives, right? We're asking people to really socialize. You know, more HR people would be of help. But when you go into the interview process and you talk about cyber, all people think about is DEF CON. All people think about is hacking. And it's like, how do you get hiring managers to understand that we need to be willing to pay for those people, even if they're not a wealth of jobs, to add to a team so that they can bring their skill set to, you know, a team that's already got these other skill sets that could be used to create a well-balanced team. The second thing to say is, I really feel like because our industry is so male dominated and because we've got issues a lot, and not with all men, because most of my successes have come from men mentoring me, is toxic masculinity. I think men are afraid to discuss feelings. And a lot of times what I find in organizations, it's almost that like camaraderie is around the toughness. It's around not sharing that you're scared. It's around fear of failure. So you don't admit that you don't know. I think that's a lot of the issue that we have today is we have to admit that we're not getting diversity and inclusion right to begin with. What we keep doing is putting a Band-Aid on it. It's a gaping wound, right, bleeding. And we're like, okay, here's this Band-Aid. But because no one will talk about it, everyone just lets it happen. And then thankfully we have companies that are building solutions to solve that. But then these same people write the bad job descriptions and they don't know why no one's applying, or they want to, okay, we need a diversity candidate, we're going to pay the minimum. So there are other issues that we need to talk about that if we don't talk about, no matter what we do, we're not going to get to the core of the issue.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, no matter who the hiring manager is, the hiring manager is always just going to hire the best candidate, no matter who it is.
Yep.
So my advice back to the community is, in addition to building your brand and networking, continue working on your technical skills behind the scenes. Learn on your own. You know, leverage all the resources out there. If you're coming to the show, don't just get stuck in, you know, all the at the booth or, you know, at events like this. You got to go out and learn. Listen to the talks. Talk to folks like us, right? And learn about what's trending, what's happening, what's hot, because the managers are only going to hire the best candidates. I agree with you that there is a diversity pool that they have to pull from, but don't let that be the reason why they're hiring.
Yes.
Be the best candidate,
That's exactly
the most rounded, well-versed candidate, and I think that's the best advice we can give these folks.
I would like to touch back on a point you talked about, Jules, around, like, I call it like psychological safety and vulnerability. Within how I operate as a manager, and what I've been taught is that, like, I really do believe in, like, this could be just me being like crazy about it, but I believe in the family-oriented aspect of team development and building. I truly believe that if vulnerability does not start for myself as a leader, how do I ask of others to put themselves in that position? I am okay saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am okay, as my wife would tell me, go out on the limb, that's where the fruit is. Go out and put yourself there, because that's really the only way that people can actually have the psychological and vulnerability of trust to be able to open themselves in that manner to say, like, you know what, I may not get this, but the fear of not saying something will not stop me from saying something in the end. Another one is like, closed mouths don't get fed.
That's it. I just said that to myself today. I said that to myself today. And it's so funny. I made a statement on Twitter that got quite negative feedback, mostly from Black Twitter. And I said that, you know, when I first joined, whenever I join a new startup, they're typically male-owned. And mostly because I find that it's been easier for me to get men to go, smart, I'll take a chance. And I'm like, okay, yeah, and now I've got to prove it. But in my experience, the way that I've been able to build trust is by going where they are first. So if they like to go to baseball games, I go with them. They want to go to the restaurant, I'm there. If they I'm not going to come in as a female and say you must adapt to me, because you know what? Even in the spirit of negotiation, the goal is when you guys can meet in the middle. And if I feel like maybe they don't think there's a problem, but I feel like I'm the change, right? Juliet's going to be the change, just in the fact that I'm a Black female and I'm coming in as a new person. I'm going to go where they are first in their level of comfort, and then I'm going to start to try to pull them towards me, right? To change the mindset requires me to understand where they're coming from, gain their trust, and then get them to trust that anything I'm asking from them after that may be uncomfortable, but it also is to the betterment of the entire group. And a lot of the feedback on that was like, oh, you're enabling them. You like to go there and I think one person said I was tap dancing, and shucking and jiving is what she said. And it was like, I was taken aback by it. I was actually quite hurt because I was like, I'm not the shuck and jive type. But it was almost like, what was the alternative? To go in and fight them, day one? And that's a lot of it too, is how do we get women and minority candidates comfortable with being uncomfortable? Until they're in a position to change, until they can make change. Because I go in at the VP, senior VP level now, right? But we have entry-level people going into these jobs, and they're the least, they're the lowest in terms of the hierarchy. How do we make them comfortable with sometimes toxic environments so that we can get more people in? Because if they don't stay, we have to find another person to go in, right? How do we do that?
So, if I may try to attempt to answer the question. The thing that I heard and I took away from what you're saying, Juliet, it was I call it the concept of grace and humility.
Yeah.
Like when you meet people with grace, you meet them where they're at, then you sort of work out how's the journey to where we need to get to.
Yeah.
Can we get there together? And if that's the case, like how do we do that? Mm-hmm. And I think that starts with just having transparent dialogue and conversation. I'm all for transparency. Yeah. And I think that stems back to the whole concept of vulnerability in a way. There is an aspect of trust that has to be developed, and I almost call it nurturing in an environment where there's a healthy aspect of conversations. I understand there's some toxic environments, yeah. And not denying that they exist, but it's, well, who's going to be the catalyst of change, as you mentioned, yes. And that change sometimes comes at as an unfunded mandate cost, yes. Use a military government type term. So it's like when people are trying to recognize that there is a potential issue in the environment and they are attempting to make change, do the people around them notice that change? Are your managers and directors above noticing that there's a change? Because sometimes it could be really cultural, like toxic, where sometimes it is okay to walk away. Yes. Mm-hmm. That this life is what it is, and it is okay to say, this may not be the best place for me to nurture and grow as an individual, as an information security specialist, cybersecurity specialist. Let me figure out where is best for me.
Agreed.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, if you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable, find the next one.
That's exactly.
Yeah, that's the best advice that we can probably give the community is. There's so many jobs out there, as we've been talking about, is find the next one. And back to your point, for leaders like yourself that are going to VP, SVP, chief level roles, understand of what you described, the up and coming, the new hires, right? So their first job, we were all there at one point, right? How can we help them? How can we guide them as they move up in the world? And then for our kids, they're going to be the hiring manager for our kids.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
So we have to help. It's all a cycle, and we just have to be aware that's happening, and it's getting better in my opinion.
I think so.
It's getting better. I know it definitely improve.
I agree.
Like a circle of life around here.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got. I think we've had a tremendous discussion. I'd love to continue this in some other venue, but thanks, Charles. Thank you, Chris.
Yes,
and
thank you.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.